All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review. Today we're continuing our RBT Exam Practice series where we're going through the next set of our practice exam questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking for our proven study materials, check out btexamreview.com. We offer 3 practice exams, a task list study guide, and of course our famous combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Other than that, let's work hard, study hard, get to our questions. Question 1. Even though she has a huge exam tomorrow, Mary decides to go out with her friends. She doesn't get home until 2 a.m. and ends up failing her exam. Mary never stays out until 2 a.m. again before an exam. What influenced Mary's behavior? Okay, influence just means changed in this context, right? We're always looking at how is behavior changing? Because when we're talking about consequences, we're always worried about future behavior and if that behavior changed. Remember, if the behavior doesn't change, it isn't punishment, it isn't reinforcement. The behavior must change in some fashion. Mary's behavior clearly has changed here. And how? Well, she had an exam and she went out with her friends, stayed up till 2 a.m. And then what happened? Well, she failed her exam. So, pretty bad consequence, right? As a result, she never stays out until 2 a.m. again before an exam. So, staying out until 2 a.m. has decreased. So, what influenced Mary's behavior? Well, if the behavior decreased, is that going to be reinforcement or punishment? Well, it's going to be punishment, right? And this is the process we go through for reinforcement and punishment questions. Has the behavior increased? Has it decreased? Oh, it's decreased. We're looking at punishment. Then we have to determine, was it positive or negative punishment? Remember, positive just means we've added something, and negative just means we've taken something away. Well, the failing grade has clearly been added, right? So this positive punishment of failing her exam has influenced her behavior. So A and B, positive and negative reinforcement, are out because the behavior decreased, so it didn't increase. Positive punishment is what we're looking for. The behavior decreased as a result of adding something, adding a stimulus. No stimulus was taken away. So even though negative punishment would decrease behavior, we didn't take anything away. We added something, making it positive. We decreased behavior, making it punishment. Our answer here is positive punishment. If you're just starting out, this is what you need to do for questions. You have to go through them slowly. What's important is answering each question you see correctly. As you get more and more correct, and as you get more and more fluent, your speed will increase. Okay, don't rush through practice. Practice should take time. You want to get every question you attempt correct. A dad is teaching his son how to hammer nails into pieces of wood. The dad tells his son that he needs to hit the nails harder. The dad is referring to what aspect of behavior? Remember our 3 aspects of behavior that we want to analyze. We're looking at function, or why the behavior is occurring. Topography, what does the behavior look like? And then magnitude. Magnitude is intensity. It's big, small, soft, hard, these kind of attributes of behavior. If we're talking about magnitude, we're not changing why the behavior is occurring. We're not changing what the behavior looks like. We're just changing how the intensity feels, how the magnitude of it, right? So in this case, the dad is teaching his son how to hammer nails, and the dad tells his son, well, you need to hit the nails harder. Does the dad want to change the function? Well, no, though. He wants to achieve the same goal by hitting the nails. Does he want to change the topography? Well, no, he still wants him to do the hammering motion. What he wants to change is C, the magnitude. This keyword here, harder, indicates a change in magnitude or intensity. So if you ever see a question that's discussing behavior change, and we're trying to make something louder, something quieter, harder, softer, longer, shorter, all these aspects of behavior where the topography isn't necessarily changing and the function isn't necessarily changing, you're typically going to be leaning towards magnitude. So in this case, the dad wants the son to hit the nails harder. The dad is referring to C, magnitude. The sound of a gun firing signals sprinters to start running. What would sprinters want to reduce relative to the gun going off and beginning to run? Now take a second and analyze the question. It is worded a little funky, so we want to take our time on these questions. We want to do all our work up front. What would sprinters want to reduce? Okay, so we immediately think, what are we trying to reduce? Relative to the gun going off and beginning to run. Well, that is the key to this question because we know the sound of a gun firing signals sprinters to start running. So if we want to reduce what between the gun going off and us beginning to run? A, duration. Well, we're looking at time in between, remember? So we're looking at time in between going off and beginning to run. Duration just looks at the length of a single instance of behavior, right? It's very important you understand with our time-based measurements that duration is not like inter-response time and latency. Inter-response time and latency look at time in between. Duration looks at the total time for the response. We're looking at time in between. So what about inter-response time? Well, inter-response time is time in between responses. And we're not looking at time in between responses here, right? We're really looking at the SD, which is the sound of a gun firing, and beginning to run. So if we want to reduce the time between the SD and the response, we are going to want to deal with C, latency. Latency is simply the time in between our SD and our response. And then rate, we're not looking at any frequency measurement here. If you don't have frequency, you cannot have rate. That is something you should always remember. Don't get rate confused with our other time measurements. Yes, there is a time component to rate. Without frequency, though, we can't find rate. In this case, we want to reduce the latency between the SD and the response, the going off, and beginning to run. Which of the following aspects is a disadvantage of using continuous measurement? So we're looking at continuous measurement here. What is continuous measurement? We're recording all aspects of behavior, frequency, rate, duration, latency, okay? Inter-response time. All these are types of continuous measurement. The question wants to know a disadvantage of continuous measurement, meaning what is something not so great about continuous measurement? A, continuous measurement provides accurate behavior data. Well, that's clearly not a disadvantage, so A is out. B, continuous measurement requires a certain amount of resources. This is true. Continuous measurement can be difficult because you have to record all instances of behavior. If you have a 5-hour class or a 5-hour session and you're using continuous measurement, you've got to record all 5 hours. This takes time, takes money sometimes. It just takes a lot of resources to do continuous measurement. It is certainly a disadvantage. C, continuous measurement can measure responses over time. Well, that's an advantage, right? It's very flexible. And then D, continuous measurement records all instances of behavior. Again, that is an advantage, right? Our continuous measurement captures all instances of behavior, which is one of the reasons we use it. The only disadvantage here of using continuous measurement is that it requires a certain amount of resources. If you don't have the time, the money, or the people, right, you're probably not going to want to use continuous measurement. A basketball coach tells his team that he will buy them breakfast if they take 1 charge per game. Once they earn breakfast, then they must take 2 charges per game, then 3, and so on. What is the basketball coach doing? All right, let's break this down. We have a coach and says, if you take 1 charge, I buy you breakfast. What is our reinforcement schedule? Well, an FR1, right? Every charge you take, I buy you breakfast. But then he says, then you have to take 2 charges. Now we're on an FR2. Then 3, FR3, 4, FR4, so on and so forth. So what is this basketball coach doing? A, fading the reinforcement schedule. Yes, right? Why is this considered fading the reinforcement schedule? Well, fading is essentially increasing the response requirement, right? It's going to take more responses to earn the same amount of reinforcement. If we're going FR1, 2, 3, 4, that is slowly fading the reinforcement schedule. A is good. Let's keep reading. B, increasing the response requirement. Also yes, right? Initially, it only took 1 charge to get breakfast. Now it's 2. Now it's 3. Now it's 4. Okay? The response requirement has slowly changed. C, using a variable ratio schedule. Be careful. This is not a variable ratio schedule, right? Each time he sets the schedule, it's fixed. You must take 1 charge. You must take 2. You must take 3. There is no average, right, when he implements the schedule. It is not a variable ratio. It's a fixed ratio. So the basketball coach is fading reinforcement. He is increasing the response requirement, but he's not using a variable ratio schedule. Be very careful there, all right? So what is he doing? Well, only A and B. If you don't understand why he's not using a variable schedule and why it's fixed, make sure you go back and review our fixed versus variable videos. If your supervisor is discussing a client's progress with a parent and the supervisor says that the skill acquisition goal is trending up, what do they mean by that? What do they mean by this idea of trending up? Well, what's a trend? A trend is basically what direction is our data moving, right? Which direction is the data path going? Okay, so if we were to graph something and we had an upward trend line, that line would be moving upwards, downward trend line, that line will be moving downwards. So if the supervisor says a client's progress and that the skill acquisition goal is trending up, which way is that data going? Well, it's going upwards, right? And it's a skill acquisition goal, so we are slowly getting better and better and better. So what does your supervisor mean by saying, well, the skill is trending up? A, the skill is improving. Yes, right? If we were to graph it and look at it, you could see the data path slowly moving upwards. The skill is regressing. Well, no, if the trend line was going down, maybe we'd have an issue, but the trend it's upwards, right? Skill is not changing. What must be changing if it's trending up? And the skill is mastered. The skill is not yet mastered because it's continuing to rise, okay? So all the supervisor here means is that the skill is slowly improving. A team of technicians and a behavior analyst are deciding what antecedent intervention they want to use with their client. Which of the following options would they not choose? All right, let's think about this. We're looking at different options for antecedent interventions, okay? And so if we want to decide what antecedent intervention we're going to use with our client, well, first we need to know what are some different antecedent interventions that exist. Non-contingent reinforcements, okay, functional communication training, deprivation satiation, all those are antecedent interventions. So these are some of the things we have in mind. The question wants to know which option would they not choose. So likely we're going to have to determine one of these is not an antecedent intervention. So A, non-contingent reinforcement. Well, non-contingent reinforcement is an antecedent intervention, so they might use that. B, deprivation of a reinforcer. Deprivation is an antecedent intervention. It involves motivating operations. They could use that. Differential reinforcement. That's a consequence intervention. Since the consequence intervention, they're not going to be using that for an antecedent intervention. They might use it as part of their package, but if they're picking an antecedent intervention, they're not going to pick differential reinforcement because it's a consequence intervention. And then D, functional communication training is totally fine. Again, that is a type of antecedent intervention. So which of the following options would they not choose? Well, they're not going to choose the consequence intervention. They're not going to choose differential reinforcement. You are told to use a partial interval recording procedure to measure your client's hand clapping behavior. When would you record a response? So we are looking at when we want to record our responses, because with this continuous measurement, there are certain times when we will and won't record responses. Because remember, in each interval, only one response is going to be recorded. In this case, we're using partial interval recording, meaning if that behavior occurs at all during the interval, we're going to record a response, specifically for hand clapping behavior. So if you're the technician and you're using partial interval recording to record hand clapping behavior, when would you record a response? A, each time the client claps. If you did that, your data would be very off for partial interval recording. Each interval only gets one data point, right? And that's one of the keys with discontinuous measurement. Each interval only gets one data point. So you're not going to record every time they clap. If the client claps during an interval is when you would record, okay? And then once you record for that interval, you're done recording, all right? So if we have 10 intervals, the most data points we can have for interval recording is 10. If the client claps during the whole interval, that's whole interval recording, not partial. And if the client claps at the end of the interval, momentary time sampling, not partial. If we're using partial interval recording to measure hand clapping behavior, we're going to record if the client claps during an interval, yes or no. Simple as that. Fantastic. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful, or I hope you had a wonderful New Year's, I should say. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.